This is the first video of the series of theory development in educational leadership. In this series of videos, I'll introduce the major events and theoretical views in each decade of the field of educational leadership. This video is about what happened before educational leadership was established as an academic field. Before we start this historical tour of the theory development of educational leadership, I'd like to clarify two things. The first thing is about the terms of educational administration, educational management, and educational leadership. In early years, educational administration was the term mostly used in the United States and the Commonwealth countries. But by the 1970s, the term educational management was increasingly used and became the norm in the United Kingdom and much of the Europe. At the end of the 20th century, educational leadership began to replace the previous terms as the name for the field. For consistency and simplicity, I use the term educational leadership throughout this series of videos on the theory development of educational leadership. The second thing is that the theory development of educational leadership was attributed to scholars around the world. Most of the major events and theoretical views I introduced in this series of videos were in the United States. I received my graduate school training in the United States, so I am more familiar with what happened in America. But I don't want to undervalue the contribution made by scholars from other countries, so I call what I interpreted in this series of videos the American version. The origin of the field of educational leadership can be traced back to the early 1800s. The first book about educational leadership was written by William Harold Payne in 1875. The title of the book is Chapters on School Supervision, a practical treatise on superintendence, grading, arranging courses of study, the preparation and use of blanks, records, and reports, examination for promotion, etc. When the book was published in 1875, Payne was a 39-year-old superintendent of schools in Michigan after serving as a teacher in New York and a school principal in Michigan. 4 years after the publication of the book, Payne was appointed as the professor of the science and art of teaching at the University of Michigan. He was the first university professor of pedagogy in the United States. The journal that has the longest history in educational leadership is National Association of Secondary School Principals Bulletin. Its first volume was published in 1917. The articles in the Volume 1, Issue 1 covered the topics like high school principals, supervised student activities in the school program, measurement tests in the first term geometry, experiments in the supervised study, and the quantitative and qualitative credit for high school work. During the first quarter of the 20th century, the dominant view of administration was Frederick Taylor's Principles of Scientific Management, which was published in 1919. Taylor was the founding father of organizational studies. Taylor was an American manufacturing manager and later a management consultant. Taylor's principles of scientific management emphasized efficiency and effectiveness through impersonal authority. A manager's job was to know exactly what they wanted from the subordinates and ensure the subordinates had done the job efficiently and effectively. In 1947, the National Council of Professors of Educational Administration was founded under the guidance of Walter Cocking, editor of the School Executive, and E.B. Norton, professor of Educational Administration at the Teachers College, Columbia. As a historical background, this was the world in 1947. The Cold War began in an effort to fight the spread of communism. Antibiotic resistance was discovered. The American EEG Society was established. An EEG was a test used to evaluate the electrical activity in the brain. Brain cells, also called neurons, communicate with each other through electrical activities. In the field of educational leadership, to meet the growing demand for school principal preparation programs, universities hired professors to teach classes of educational administrators. Most of those professors were retired superintendents in large urban school districts and senior school principals. They drew on their own practices, techniques, personal success stories, and lively anecdotes. The theoretical foundation of educational leadership did not exist. That was not the case in the broad field of administrative science. In 1947, Herbert Simon published the first edition of the book Administrative Behavior, a study of decision-making processes in administrative organization. The book became so popular among administrative scientists that its later editions were published in 1957, 1976, 1997, and 2001. The book laid the foundation for administrative organizations to be studied in a scientific manner. In the book, Simon asserted that decision-making was the heart of administration and that the vocabulary of administrative theory must be derived from the logic and psychology of human choice. Simon's research was very interdisciplinary and spanned across the fields of cognitive science, computer science, public administration, management, and political science. Simon was best known for the theory of bounded rationality and was awarded the Nobel Prize for his contribution to the construct of uncertainty in decision-making. That is, it is impossible to have the perfect and complete information at any given time to make a decision. Max Weber was another influential figure. He was not specifically interested in the field of educational leadership. Weber was a German sociologist, jurist, and political economist. He opposed positivism. His contribution to the theory and methodology significantly influenced critical theory, which was the theoretical root of education equity, social justice, leadership, and critical race theory. All of those theoretical constructs and theories became popular among educational leadership scholars since the 2000s. Weber's indirect influence on educational leadership was so profound that you still see his work being cited by current scholars in the field. In 1947, the same year Herbert Simon published the book Administrative Behavior, Weber published the book titled The Theory of Social and Economic Organization. In that book, Weber discussed the implications of charismatic leadership for organizations. Charismatic leadership draws its name from the Greek word charisma, meaning divine gift. Charisma was considered as something that leaders had, and that something set leaders apart from ordinary people. A charismatic leader was treated as a savior, a superman, and a hero. But that view of charismatic leadership was problematic. If charisma was born, then how to explain that a person's charisma can dramatically increase or decrease after his or her death? Nowadays, charisma is considered as a person's perceived capacity to inspire devotion and enthusiasm. It is not something that leaders have, but rather how followers perceive their leaders. Charisma can have a dark side because many charismatic leaders are narcissistic and delusional. Some scholars consider charisma as a curse, not a cure for social problems. Charismatic leadership was introduced as a theory for organizational research by Robert House in the 1970s. It did not enter the field of educational leadership until the 1990s through a related leadership theory called transformational leadership, which is still very popular among educational leadership researchers and practitioners. If you look up the definition of transformational leadership, you will find 5 factors. First, intellectual stimulation, which means leaders mentally challenge their followers to be creative and find solutions to difficult problems. Second, individualized consideration, which means leaders give advice and support and pay attention to each follower's needs. Third, inspirational motivation, which means leaders motivate their followers by envisioning the future. I talked about how to make a vision that truly inspires people in a different video. You will find the link below. The fourth and fifth factor of transformational leadership are both about charisma. Individualized influence comes from leaders' values, beliefs, and a sense of mission. Even though charismatic leadership was introduced to leadership research in the 1970s, its related theory, transformational leadership, did not enter the field of educational leadership until the 1990s. Please take note of both influential scholars I just mentioned, Herbert Simon and Max Weber. Even though they were not educational leadership scholars, their influence fueled a very big debate in the 1970s. That debate was the most extensive intellectual debate in the history of educational leadership. Some scholars even called that debate the paradigm war in educational leadership. I will talk more about that debate in the video of the 1970s theory development of educational leadership. This video is about the origin of the field of educational leadership, which can be traced back to the early 1800s. The next video will be about the theory development of educational leadership in the 1950s.